Welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of this 3-part series of my new studio space. Now, if you haven't seen the first episode, make sure to click the link above and go watch that first to kind of introduce the idea. But in this episode, we're going to be diving into the actual renovations and the things that we did to kind of prep this space up a little bit for the things that we were going to be doing. Now, as you saw in the previous episode, upon walking in, I noticed that the biggest issues were the walls and that table were just very dirty and kind of just messed up. Now, of course, with this space, there are certain rules and regulations that we do need to kind of abide by because, again, this is not necessarily owned by me. It's still owned by the college that I go to, so we have to obviously stay within those guidelines. However, there were some things that we were able to do. All right, so we're here at Lowe's. We're here to pick up some sandpaper and a couple different grits of it just so we can get a nice finish on that table, along with like a disposable paint tray, which would be nice just so we can actually not have to carry around a paint tray and we can just get rid of it afterwards. It'll just kind of make the whole process a lot more easier for us. We also need some extension cords just so that we have a lot more plugs so we don't have to be worrying about what's plugged in, and we can just plug everything in and we won't have any issues with that. So those are like the main components that we need to pick up. Let's go get them.
Yes, wrong.
Hardest part is always trying to find the things that you need, so hopefully you don't struggle too much. Alright, so we found the extension cords. I'm thinking we need at least 2, because we have 2 separate plugs that we can plug them into, so I'll go with this one. I think that's pretty good. And then I sort of like this one because it also has like the USB ports in it, so that will be sort of convenient for us, basically. So I like that. Let's grab this one. Found the paint trays. This one looks good. Nothing crazy. It works well. Alright, good enough for me. Last thing that we need is sandpaper. Oh, would you look at that? It's right here. Cool. It's always weird vlogging in public. Okay, so we need a couple different grits. These are our assortments. Here's 80, 120, 180, 220, 400, also 400 there. Alright, so we're just gonna grab a couple different assortments of these. We'll probably grab like an 80 grit. Let's grab like a 120, probably 220, and then 400. And then from there, then we'll also get the maybe 600 sponge, I guess you could say. What's good about the sponge though is like you can also kind of like hold it, so this will sort of be good. This one's not good though because this one's ripped, so not that one. Items have been acquired. Let's get out of here and let's head back to the studio. Now, first things first were the walls. Lucky enough, I do like the fact that the walls were completely white for the most part. And since the space is very small, I want to make sure to kind of make the space feel as big and open as possible. And that's why having white walls tend to kind of give you that effect. At the same time, because they are white, they also bounce light really well. So in terms of lighting myself and lighting the things that we were going to be doing in this space, it was going to be a lot easier and look a lot better at the end of the day. We brought some tools from the house, and lucky enough, I actually had a paint can of just the color white hanging around at home. We brought that in along with some brushes and a roller. While painting, we of course used the normal techniques of using the roller for the long streaks and the long lengths of the wall to cover the most surface area. And of course, we used a normal brush to kind of get into certain corners or try to touch up certain areas that it was just a lot more difficult to use the roller. This didn't really take too long. I believe it took us about 3-4 hours, and after that, we let it dry for the next day and we moved on to the next phase of these renovations. Now, as you can tell, the tables were pretty rough. I believe the previous student here must have used the table, obviously, for painting, and there was just dried up paint everywhere. I almost even contemplated getting rid of the table and just getting my own, but I thought, you know what? This room is essentially kind of a DIY project. I don't really want to bring anything too expensive or buy anything necessarily extra. I want to just bring things in from home, things that I haven't used in a long time that could essentially just have a new home for it. This space isn't permanent. I'm only going to be here for however long it still takes me to finish off my degree, so there's really no point in buying all these fancy new things. So I thought it would be a lot better to just kind of work with the table and see what we can do to make it better. So we started off with 80 grit sandpaper first, and then we moved on up to 120 grit, just trying to get rid of as much paint as possible and tried to smooth it off as much as we could. After that, we moved up to 220, then to 320 grit sandpaper, and then we finally finished off with 600 grit sandpaper. This sandpaper was more of like a sponge for the most part in terms of the way it was held, and we kind of just finished off the tabletop using that. And I felt like it came out pretty good. There are of course still certain spots on the tabletop that you could still kind of see some blemishes, you could still see a little bit of paint. I think part of the reason for this was because between the 80 grit and the 120 grit, I think if we stuck around a bit longer using those, I think the end result would have been a lot better. For what we're doing, it wasn't really that big of a deal. It felt super smooth to the touch and kind of running my hands off, and for me, as I'm not that much of a handyman, I thought I did pretty good. So I'll take the end result in terms of what we got. The place was so dusty, it was kind of insane. We didn't have a vacuum cleaner to vacuum up everything. However, we did have a brush and a tray to kind of sweep things up and put it in the trash. It took a bit longer, but it's all good. We ended up also bringing in a mop from home, which is one of those kind of reusable ones that has Velcro on the back, and we're able to just put some water on it and then use that to kind of pick up any of that excess dust. I am very OCD when it comes to things being clean. If I'm doing anything hands-on, I like to have a very clean space, and I think that goes for all of us. So now you probably noticed that we never mentioned the floors, and I know that typically for a new space, you'll more than likely be working on the floor, whether you're changing it for tiles or something, putting hardwood floors, or just painting the floor in general. I know that's typically a thing that you would do, and I definitely would have loved to paint the floor and have it look a lot nicer, because I'm sure you've noticed there's also paint on the floor. However, like I mentioned earlier, there are rules and regulations that we do need to follow because this space isn't technically 100% ours, and the floors are a particular gray. Now that gray isn't just within the studio space. That color gray actually extends out of the studio and even into the classroom that is connected to this space. So with that being said, I didn't want to run the risk of getting the wrong color gray and painting the floors and it not match with the outside. For situations like this and a lot of things that we record, you don't really see the floor anyway, and honestly it kind of just leaves a hint of character. It kind of enhances creativity a bit and kind of makes you feel like you need to kind of tiptoe around the space a bit less, but really just use the space. That might be totally bullshit and I just made that up on the spot, but it kind of makes sense. And after cleaning everything up, we finally had a clean, blank space to start bringing things in. Now we'll dive into what those things were in the next episode. So if you guys like the video, make sure to leave a like down below. Consider subscribing. It's not 100% required. I totally get it. Maybe next time. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Love you guys. I'll see you guys around.